So coming up, we have Peter and Wendy, the Disney Plus. Thought this was going to go to theaters. They hired David Lowry, who previously did another big adaptation for them, which was the Pete's Dragon one. Got a lot of people from there to be able to make an independent film, and he's been really good of making like a big one for them, one for me. This new one is his take on Peter Pan and Wendy. Everyone complained about this movie being too dark. The IMDb ratings were turned off for this movie for like the whole opening weekend until recently. It's out. I don't hate it,
No.
but they did completely make it drastically different. I went to go rewatch the first one, the original one. I didn't realize they put a tag on that one as well. Disney's been adding like intros saying the stuff in this movie, we don't stand by it, but it doesn't tell you what in the movie, so they still kind of showcase it to you. So I'm curious like what the learning lesson is there. This, assume, fixes it. It changes a little bit of stuff within the film.
Yeah.
If you know the story of Peter Pan and Wendy, Peter Pan comes in, takes these kids, they go back to the Lost Boys, who aren't really the Lost Boys anymore, going up against Captain Hook, who's going up against Peter Pan. A lot of the themes are still there, and a lot of the themes really resonated with me, and I thought worked a lot better here than they may have in previous adaptations. But then it also switches a lot of what the character motivations are originally in the tale. I didn't mind the darkness of it. I think the movie came out at the wrong time because you released this pre-2011 and people would have ate this up. We're just in a color moment right now. Everybody wants to have colorful movies. Colors are back in cinemas. So no one wants the dreary stuff. I think it's wrong timing on their part with it. But I didn't think it was terrible. However, the internet's not going to take that. But I think it's an interesting spin on tale.
No, there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff here, and I don't think it's necessarily the most successful film in general, or even necessarily the most successful of these Disney adaptations of animated movies into live action, although most of them are pretty dreadful. This is better than most of them. It's interesting to see Lowry, who is this filmmaker that's interested in much broader ideas and much more interesting stuff, try to apply some of that here. I think there are echoes of The Green Knight in this movie, just elements of like anxiety and expectation and gender role and stuff like that, all sort of are mirrored in the two movies. That being said, like it's a little bit, it doesn't dive as deep because it is still a Peter Pan movie, and they do some things to kind of streamline elements of the story to get rid of some problematic stuff, but they also lengthen other things in weird ways, like giving like the whole Captain Hook backstory they added. I don't know what you thought about that element that was new.
Yeah, again, that switching out some of the Lost Boys, like they're like fixing a previous problem, but it almost creates a dent in what the whole point of the story is. But again, that's if you're comparing it to the classic, which, I mean, yeah, you kind of have to. That's why it is a Peter Pan adaptation. But I don't.
Why they made the
mind
first? This new one.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm indifferent sometimes to the changes because it's not as it doesn't fix everything as much as they want to. It reminds me of the West Side Story. Where they fixed a lot of the previous stuff, but so did the previous one, and so did the previous one. So in 20 years' time, there'll be somebody else who fixes whatever the last one had.
Yeah, well,
I still think it's an interesting route.
All of them are ultimately just reflections of the times they were made, right? And that's 100%. Going to be the thing that will be interesting about it 20 years from now, is like this is what at least a studio assumed the times called for. And you know, that again goes to the lighting that we're talking about too, because that is kind of the look of these big blockbusters now that have these very like overly dark interiors, and then occasionally we'll get these exteriors that are much more vibrant because they are actually using natural lighting. And with this film, all the stuff that people complained about, I had none of those issues whenever they would just go outside. Like there's a lot of stuff that was in daylight that looked great, even though it wasn't necessarily like as colorful as the animated stuff. It still looked great and you could see it all, but when they're inside, it's just super dark and spotlit and too motivated by trying to make the light seem like it's coming from natural sources rather than just remembering we're all in a movie and it doesn't have to be that natural.
And that's where I'm of two minds. yes, there is this whole thing that's happening between a lot of blockbusters doing that. You don't think that that's David's style?
It's definitely partially David's style, but it's also just sort of like the Disney house style for these live action adaptations recently. Like they all are a bit underlit and
The
like
realism.
just yeah, trying to make it feel a little bit too real in a way that like doesn't complement how fantastical these stories are. Like they're not reality. They shouldn't necessarily try to portray themselves that way.
How do you feel about the fishes in Little Mermaid? Everyone's upset that they're not more cartoony, but they're more live action, yet they're still doing the cartoony things, right? Like you just said.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like choose. I feel like you got to choose your lane. Either you're gonna go
Yeah.
cartoony or you got to go realistic.
And
And
everything
splitting
else
the
has to
difference
go
just
with
puts
it.
you in like a weird uncanny valley.
For sure. Also, they're meant to be in theaters. Like that's the
Yeah.
reason why they shoot it. That I always call back to the Game of Thrones cinematographer. I get what he was saying, but he also sounded like an idiot saying we shot these in really expensive cameras for really expensive TVs, and it's like, but not everybody has one, and I think it's pretty bogus to tell people that. I don't know. They should have given it the chance to at least play in theaters, but clearly they did not have the faith for it. I
Yeah.
still
I feel
think
like
it's
we can
decent.
criticize that. I feel like we can criticize that a little bit more on a movie like Peter Pan and Wendy versus a show like Game of Thrones, because like a Game of Thrones is made to be watched in the evening on your biggest best TV. A movie like Peter Pan and Wendy is made to be watched over and over and over again by your child on Disney Plus in the middle of the day when the lights when the sun is out and all the windows are open. So like if you can't see it under those conditions, then maybe they did have some error in their calculation.
Fair. Peter Pan and Wendy, the art house version of them by David Lowery, out on Disney Plus.